Harihi Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditamastu ma vidivishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Jaya Shri Krishna Caitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. So yesterday we talked about how we are to deal with other religions and philosophies. Who can give me a balanced, like a completely balanced overall idea of how we are to deal with other religions and philosophies that we come in contact with, and why? That's a big one. Who can do it all? Or who can do some of it and someone can finish? Chandrika.
Okay, we should see the other, when other people worship their God, we should see it like they're worshipping my God, but in a different way. And but their worshipping is not complete.
Okay, good. Anyone want to add anything to that? Respectfully.
We should
treat them respectfully. There are two reasons we gave why it's important to give respect. Anybody? You don't remember them. You weren't here.
Yeah.
Do you remember what they are?
I don't know what to say. We shouldn't blaspheme the Shastra.
Because?
Because I don't know. They should come from the Lord.
We can discourage them for the fact and also commit offenses against the fact itself.
Yes. Because their Shastra, although it's been watered down through translations and what do you call that? Interpretation. Thank you. He knows English better than I do, which is not difficult. Even though it's been watered down by interpretation and such, at its principal core, it is Krishna's words. It's God's words on how to get to know Him. And so, if we're blaspheming their literature, we're actually blaspheming literature in pursuance of the Vedic version, because the principle is to serve God. So that's the one reason. And the first reason, as Pandav Mashai pointed out, is that since everyone can start the spiritual path no matter where they are in life, no matter what habits, no matter how bad materially they seem. And if they're trying, even if it's an inferior path, if they're trying at least to evolve spiritually, to uncover their spiritual nature, then we shouldn't discourage them. We should encourage them in whatever way we possibly can to follow whatever process they're following better, and find out what it is about their process that they're most attracted to, and fan that spark. Now there was another aspect. So this is Chandrika mentioned the respectful aspect and accepting these different religions and understanding that these practitioners, they're also worshiping my God. They're just doing it in a different way because they have a different culture. They're using different language, eating different kinds of food, wearing different kinds of clothes. But in principle, they're trying to get to know God and trying to serve Him. Now, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, after he established that, he also pointed out the other side of this. Does anybody remember what that was?
We should not be diverted to follow their path.
We should not
Not be diverted to follow their path.
Not be diverted to follow their path. Okay, that's definitely a potential problem we have when we try to do bridge preaching, is we cross the bridge to bring them over, and then we just stay on the other side of the bridge. That's certainly there. But what Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur pointed out is that if there is an actual bona fide flaw in the religion, and there are several different examples, whether they're atheistic tendencies or polytheistic tendencies or pantheistic tendencies, whether they're promoting skepticism. What were the other ones without looking? Mayavad, yes. Was there another one?
Polytheism. Polytheism.
Oh, polytheism, right. And then, was there another one or not? That might be it. Materialism. Yeah, that's the most important one. Right? Because they're contrary to love. So they can't actually, they in principle are missing the point. Right? So if we see one of these things, we can try to rectify it. Right? And that's what Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur is mentioning. So at the top of the page, however, considering the follow point, although it is worthless to criticize a mere difference in the religious system, the external, the secondary, if people see a real fault, they should not simply accept it. So we're not just new agey and we just say, whatever, yato mat tatapat, as Ishvar Chandra walked in the other day and he thought I was preaching a bogus philosophy because I was saying yato mat tatapat, walking in at an inopportune moment. So it's not that we're like that, like, oh yeah, whatever path you want to follow, that's okay with you, man, peace. No, as long as you're actually following a bona fide path, then that's good. And gradually, if you're sincere, you'll come to know. Krishna will reveal it to you. As we surrender unto Him, He rewards us accordingly. Yes?
So then, can you define what does it mean bona fide? Christians are bona fide?
They have a bona fide scripture. The principle is bona fide.
How come?
How come the principle is bona fide? Because it's teaching
a... Is bona fide?
How come their scripture is bona fide?
Yeah. I mean, how this scripture, the Bible, which sets apart, it doesn't explain about the incarnation, it doesn't explain about the soul, things like that, how it's bona fide.
It does explain about these things, but that's subject to interpretation. So, the fact that it is trying to teach its followers to follow in God's footsteps and to become lovers of God, and because it came through God and His followers, some followers were more intelligent than others. So you get the Old Testament, that's that. You get the New Testament, and they are letters from different disciples of Jesus to different areas. So in the New Testament, you'll get some, and by the way, what we're doing right here, it's ill-advised by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Not only are we not supposed to criticize these other scriptures, but we're not supposed to really study them either unless it's part of our service. But for the sake of this discussion, we'll just finish the discussion. So some of these letters, because they're from humans on their experience of religion, you will get different sides being presented. And we have that as well. Our acharyas present different sides of the same issue, and they can seem to be contradictory, right? So for example, in Galatians, we're not going to talk about the Bible the entire hour here, but we're going to a little bit since you asked. In Galatians, Paul, previously known as Saul, he was writing to the people of Galatia. It's a place where he went and preached. And he was telling them, because he found out that there was some traditional influences percolating through what he was teaching. They were also going back to the Old Testament and trying to implement the tradition, religious tradition. And he took that as, the way he took their actions is that they were thinking that Jesus wasn't enough, that the words of their spiritual master weren't sufficient to give you liberation, that they were also trying these mechanical methods. And he's trying to say, no. Stop trying to focus on those things. Just focus on the teachings, right? Now, if you read, starts with a J. It wasn't John. Nope. It's been a while. It's not Jacob. Not Jacob. Anyway, his famous lines are, faith without works is dead. So one of them, Paul, seems to be only focusing on faith. This is the most important thing. You shouldn't worry about the externals. And this other fellow, name starts with a J, somehow it's escaping me. He's saying that yes, the faith is important, but if you don't have if you're not actually doing something about it, if you're just talking about it, not actually doing something about it and showing that you have faith, then it's completely dead. So it can seem like these two are saying the complete opposite thing. And we have a group of the Christian church called Methodists, appropriately named because they believe that there's a method to reach Jesus. So a lot of people think that it's all about the externals, right? So one side, it sounds like he's talking, it's all about faith. The other side, not the fellow himself, because he actually had the right understanding as far as I can tell, but some of his followers are saying, no, it's all about the activities. And so how do you reconcile that? And it's reconciled that both are important. And we learn that in our philosophy in Damodar Lila, that there has to be faith and there has to be endeavor. Both need to be there. Those are the two fingers too short that the rope was, no matter how many ropes were bound together. We also know this from the philosophy of the monkey and the kitten. You know of it? Right, so just for the sake of anyone who might not, I'm sure you all do. Do you know the monkey and the kitten philosophies? Two classes ago, Tulsi Prabhu said it, so no need to repeat it again. So the idea is that we have to understand that both are important. Now, I'm more of, if we're still talking the Bible here, even though I can't remember his name, and I just know that it starts with a J, I'm more along his lines, because God's mercy is always there. Whether we want it or not, his mercy is always there. Our endeavor to grab that mercy is the only thing that we have control over, right? So our focus should be more about the endeavor. But before anybody gets crazy and says, you're one of those monkey bhaktas, which in a sense I am, but not in that sense. I just like monkeys. We have to perform the endeavor with the right mentality. It's not that my endeavor is getting me the result. It's that my endeavor is helping me to grab Krishna's mercy, which will give the result. And that's the only way to get the result. You can't just have faith, and you can't just rely on endeavor. You have to do both, right? So, just like our philosophy has these aspects, the Bible also has these aspects. Granted, it's been, what's the word again? Interpreted many different ways, and it's been watered down in many different ways. Some of those interpretations were out of good intentions. These countless philosophies, although attempting to reach the truth, they're all incomplete and mutually conflicting. So that's there. But At the base of it, it's a philosophy that's encouraging others to accept and follow God.
So this is what defines a bona fide scripture.
That's one of the things that defines a bona fide scripture. That's the principle of it.
So no
Any-
matter who is the author, if the author says you should follow God,
Then it's literature in pursuance of the Vedic version.
but what if it doesn't explain what God is, or is misinterpreting what and who God is, but still says you should follow this God?
Give me an example.
The religion of the spaghetti monster.
The religion of the spaghetti monster. Okay. And they're
It's,
trying to say, and what are they preaching?
They're
That-
preaching there's a spaghetti monster, it's the creator of the universe.
Yes.
You can say this is good, you should follow
The
it.
source of everything, right? And what? And how is he to be followed?
I haven't delved so much into it.
Oh, you haven't delved so much into it. Okay. So, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur also shows what irreligion is, and so, and he detailed it in
It was a footnote.
yeah. It was a footnote.
Yeah, 12. I believe.
12,
No?
maybe. Footnote 12. Let's see. There are two processes of practical devotional service. No, not that one.
I just
17.
Yeah,
5 branches of irreligion. Yeah. So. Yes, thank you. So, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, well, this is given in 7th canto, so maybe that was Prahlad Maharaj, or maybe that was
17th Narada.
15th chapter. Narada Muni? Okay. So these are given there. So we can determine what's there or not. So when I was young, there was a cartoon. Not really a cartoon, it was like I think there were people in costumes, there were puppets. It was called Dinosaurs,
Yeah.
not the mama. So there was the teenage boy, child, he was a teenager, and he was going to high school, and he had an existential crisis, and he said, where do we all come from? And they had to figure it out. And since they didn't know, they made something up, and it was very much similar to your spaghetti monster religion. It was called potatoism. All hail the great potato. Everything came from the great potato, right? And then a religion started from it, but it wasn't trying to promote love of God. If it is, then Jai. It will get us a little closer than where we are. If it's trying to promote something else, like, for example, there was a famous science fiction novelist who wrote a book, we won't mention the name of it,
We will know him.
and a religion formed from it, and it has nothing to do with anything but a science fiction novel. But people have very deep faith in it. And it's not trying to teach love of God. It's something different. So this is why it's important, this is why Sri Isopanishad advises us, why it's important to learn knowledge and nescience side by side, because we have to be able to distinguish one from the other. If we can't tell the difference between a bona fide religion and a non-bona fide one, then we're going to have problems.
So this is the formula.
And Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur gave the definition.
Bona fide religion is a religion that is promoting love of God, no matter how much details are given about God, how much details are given about the practice, how to love God. But if it's the aim is to love God, this is a bona fide religion. Is this the formula?
Not 100%, but basically, we can say that. That's the principle of it. Obviously, better if it's coming from an authorized source, coming from Krishna, because if it's just coming out of thin air, it's not going to have much potency. But whatever aspect is there that is going parallel to the philosophy, it will help someone to that extent. And quite frankly, we need all the help we can get. So that's there.
Yeah, okay, because I still haven't got that accepting the God was Shastra.
Okay.
So I won't see how wide.
Okay. So I suggest read back through this section that you missed yesterday, and Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur makes it pretty clear. And he mentions it too, so if he's considering it bona fide. He also mentions that even since we spirit souls all have the same nature, Satchidananda, that we're all inclined to try to figure it out. That's what we're searching for. So even the tribals who are seeing the supreme powerful being in the sun and the rain and the mountains, they're actually on the right track. They're pretty low on that track. But if they can be taught, as he mentioned in this book, if they can be engaged according to Varnashrama, they will very quickly come to devotional service. Whereas those who are trying to, through material logic and reasoning, try to figure it out by their own mental prowess, they're just going to be distracted and they will not come to the conclusion of devotional service because they're trying to depend on themselves. So just this idea, this understanding that I can't do it on my own, it has to be through this all-powerful being, that alone is enough of a spark to fan. And that's what we're looking for. So any shastra or any teachings that promote that, that's good, at least for that, to that extent, to whatever extent it can get you closer to the actual understanding, right? But as Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur points out, if we see a real fault, and the real faults are the ones that are actually described, then we don't simply accept it. Right? So that's the summary of yesterday. We can start today now. Okay. Love of Krishna, Krishna Prema, is that pure love. Footnote 19. Simply giving oral reception to this Vedic literature, the feeling for loving devotional service to Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, sprouts up at once to extinguish the fire of lamentation, illusion, and fearfulness. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 7, Verse 7. Simply by hearing or attempting to hear the Vedic literature, feeling for loving devotional service for Lord Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, sprouts up at once to extinguish the fire of lamentation, illusion, and fearfulness. Continuing. The quality of love is that it takes shelter of one living entity and takes shelter of another living entity as its object. Prema cannot exist without ashraya, the shelter or subject, and vishaya, the object. So there has to be the lover and the beloved. The shelter of prema is the heart of the soul. The object of prema is Krishna alone. When perfect, pure prema arises, the aspects of the Lord as Brahman, the controller, and Narayan ripen into the form of Krishna. So any previous conceptions of God that we have, they ripen to actually understand Krishna's form. On reading this book and understanding the concept of prema, this will become clear. A person who argues just on hearing the name of Krishna is cheated of the truth. Quarreling about names is of no value. The living entity should search out the object indicated by the name. The sweet, right? So we can argue back and forth of what name is more potent. We can even quote Shastra to say which name is more potent, right? But quarreling about the name, Krishna and his name are non-different. When we say his name, we're associating with him. If we are fighting with others about which name they are using, then we're not serving the purpose of what Krishna actually wants. Krishna wants you to go back to him, right? If we're discouraging people from saying bona fide names, not only are we cheating them, but we're cheating ourselves, because the point of chanting Krishna's name is to get his association and to understand him. But if we're quarreling about the external form of which name, and not actually talking about this actual subject of the name, what are his qualities, what's his nature, what are his activities, we could be talking about that instead. So if that's what we're doing.
So that means that one can get Krishna's association by chanting Allah.
Eventually. Means whatever you worship, that's where you go to. But chanting any authorized name of God, and that's what Srila Prabhupada advised, he said, you don't have to chant Krishna. If you know another name of God, you just chant that, and you try to become faithful and loving to that God. And if one is sincere in chanting whichever name of God they're chanting, then Krishna sees that, and within the heart he reveals the truth. And sometimes the truth is, okay, now maybe you should chant this name. Right? And we've seen it happen. We've seen it happen both ways, actually. I've seen people from we've seen a lot of people from different traditions just convert to Krishna consciousness because, I mean, we can say it frankly among ourselves that it is a superior process if done properly, if actually applied properly. And it's easier to apply it properly because it's very, very carefully presented to us. So we have that advantage. But just because we have that advantage, it doesn't mean we're going to follow it. So we have to understand that there can be an actual proper Christian who understands that the Supreme Lord is a person and that the goal of life is to serve that personal Supreme Lord, even with their incomplete or sometimes misguiding literature. They could be following better than someone that has all of this laid out like a beautiful, detailed map. So it doesn't necessarily determine, it doesn't necessarily, tongue twister. The materials that we have won't necessarily determine where we're going to go if we don't know how to use them, right? So someone with an inferior map can actually get to a place if they know how to use it. And someone with the superior map, if they don't know how to use it, they're not going to get anywhere. So we have to understand the principle. The principle is understanding how to get from where we are to where we want to go with what we have, right? And if at some point it's possible to upgrade what we have, we certainly will. And Krishna makes that clear to us. And that's the only way it's made clear to us, through Krishna and his devotees. And Krishna's policy is that he'll allow us to take as long as we want. Because love, it's not a forced thing. It's not a mechanical thing. It's something that we choose. There has to be an option to not love in order for love to be sweet. Otherwise, it's just, that's the standard. That's just gears moving, right? There's nothing relishable about that. So, as long as we're not eager to understand the absolute truth, he's not trying to force it on us like, oh, you should be chanting this name, right? And in a similar way, we also shouldn't be doing that. But if we see a spark in someone else, we should fan it. So Krishna has his role, the devotees have their role. Some say the devotees are more merciful because, the devotees will actually encourage people where Krishna would just let them, figure it out on their own. But Krishna is also quite merciful that as soon as there's an iota of interest, he sends these devotees, right? So who's actually more merciful, I don't know. There's statements in Scripture that support both. So both are more merciful at the same time, and there's no contradiction there. So the thing with Krishna and reciprocation is that, so we learned this from the story of Sudama Brahmana. So Sudama, you know the story, his wife encouraged him to go visit Krishna, the king, because they were having a tough time. They were living in a shanty. They were having difficulties making ends meet. They were both happy, but they were emaciated and wearing old, torn, they're clean, but torn clothes. And his wife was saying to him, well, you were a classmate of Krishna's, why don't you go talk to him? And he didn't want to ask Krishna for help, but he wanted to see his old friend. And he knew that, okay, you don't go empty-handed to meet someone. And he didn't have anything though. So he actually had to borrow something from someone, this flat rice, so that he could give Krishna something. Of course, we know the story. He went, he saw Krishna. Krishna greeted him first he stood up, and then he offered obeisances. He offered arti, bathed his feet, gave him a feast, did the whole 9 yards. And then he's got this, broken up flat rice wrapped in a torn cloth, and he's embarrassed and he's trying to hide it. But Krishna says, oh, what do you have there? You have a gift for me too? And he very much relished it, and he wanted to relish more of it, but Lakshmi Devi, Rukmini, said, no, let's not do that. So the story ends that Sudama, when he returns home, he doesn't know that Krishna gave him what he gave him, but he returns home, and all of a sudden what used to be a shanty was now a huge palace with courtyards and servants, and everyone now had healthy bodies, including his wife. She was no longer emaciated and starving. She had nice clothes and ornaments and jewelry, and of course none of that went to their heads. They engaged it all in Krishna's service. They were happily serving Krishna before, they're happily serving Krishna now. But the reason why I'm telling this story is that the reason Krishna didn't tell Sudama what he was giving him is that he was embarrassed that he wasn't giving enough. Because Krishna's idea of reciprocation is, Sudama gave me more than what he had. He went and borrowed something from somebody to give me. I can't give him more than what I have because I have everything. So therefore, he's getting the short end of the stick. Krishna felt embarrassed because he couldn't properly reciprocate. Now, from Sudama's point of view, for a handful of rice, he got a freaking palace, a healthy body, all these... Sorry, I'm talking to my brother, so I'm saying words that I wouldn't normally say during class, sorry. We can snip that out. So, just ignore that, please. So, Krishna's idea of reciprocation is way different than our idea of reciprocation, right? So, a very little bit of sincerity, he will bend over backwards to send whoever will possibly give us the message. Now, the ball's still in our court. It's still up to us whether we take advantage of that devotee who is sent. But as soon as there's the slightest tinge of sincerity, for any reason, out of fear, out of desire, what are the four? Fear, desire,
misery, suffering, duty.
Fear, desire, duty, and attraction. Yeah. Whether we're calling out to Krishna for any of those four reasons, he's going to send someone to us. And that's his idea of reciprocation. So in that sense, we might say that Krishna is more merciful than the devotees. But also the devotees are also more merciful. So we have to keep all that in mind. So anything that's encouraging people on the path, it's a spark that should be fanned. That's how we deal with it. And that's how Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur is advising. Anything else on that? Hare Krishna. Did we read footnote 19? Yes, we did.
Yes.
Okay, yes. When perfect pure prema arises, the aspects of the Lord as Brahman, the controller, Narayan, ripen into the form of Krishna. We did that. Now, we did this too.
I think next page.
Quarreling about that has no value. The living entity should search out the object, yes, that's right, indicated by the name. That's the point. The sweet qualities of Krishna, as described in the crown jewel of the scriptures, Srimad Bhagavatam, were the personal realization of Vyasadeva through his spiritual vision. Through the instructions of Narada, Vyasa became absorbed in a devotional trance and saw that form of Krishna. Vyasadeva described the sweet qualities of Krishna, for he realized that by developing devotion to that form of Krishna, the jivas could drive away all forms of lamentation, illusion, and fear. This is the only thing that can drive these things away. These are the material miseries, and the only thing that can defeat material miseries or material problems is a spiritual solution. If we try to implement a material solution, then we're just going to get a different material result, which ultimately ends in more suffering. Continuing. On hearing or reading about Krishna and his sweet qualities, the living entities, according to their nature, understand him in two different ways. Understanding through true knowledge, vidvat pratiti, and understanding without knowledge, avidvat pratiti. Even when Krishna is personally present and can be seen with mortal eyes, the two types of people will see in these two different ways. If a person desires to learn more about these two types of perception, they may study the Sat-sandarbhas, Bhagavatamrita, and Sri Krishna Samhita under a competent authority. It is impossible to elaborate on this subject here. Briefly, realization through true knowledge, vidvat pratiti, may be described as realization under vidya shakti, the knowledge potency of the Lord. And understanding without knowledge, the avidvat pratiti, may be described as an attempt at understanding the Lord under ignorance. What's up? What's the joke?
I could recognize myself in the second picture.
Ah. Now, the reason why it's important to try to understand the truth through knowledge is that if we do it in any other way, we're creating unnecessary disturbances in society. We're not going to figure it out on our own. We can't. There are countless philosophies, but all, though attempting to reach the truth, they are all incomplete and mutually conflicting, being generated from illusory premises. So, anytime we're trying to reach the Supreme Lord through our own logic, understanding, intellectual prowess, through our own experience, it's going to be not so ideal, and it's going to cause unnecessary disturbances in society. So one might, for example, Ishwar Chandra, you were mentioning how sometimes it's difficult for you to accept certain so-called religions as religion based on their level of understanding. But if we take into account how well we actually follow our philosophy, then we start understanding that, okay, yeah, we also have a long way to go. Religion is meant for everyone, including the lowest of mankind. And so there are going to be different philosophies, and there are going to be different degrees of sincerity in the practitioners. And even though we have everything we need, Srila Prabhupada has given everything we need to become Krishna conscious, purely Krishna conscious, in a moment, not just in this lifetime, in a moment. He gave us everything to do that. But we've been studying it for however many years we've been studying it. It shows us that we're really attached to the material world, and so we need all the help we can get. And so wherever people are actually getting that help, bringing them closer to this idea of accepting God as the center and understanding that we are not, and giving a practical way to behave accordingly, then those processes are all to be respected. Right? Make sense? If Krishna is understood through avidvat pratiti, that's without knowledge, many controversies arise. If he is understand through vidvat pratiti, with knowledge, there's no place for disagreements, because it's clear. Footnote 20, this is Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 3, verses 37 and 38. The foolish, with a poor fund of knowledge, cannot know the transcendental nature of the forms, names, and activities of the Lord, who is playing like an actor in drama. Nor can they express such things, neither in their speculations nor in their words. Only those who render unreserved, uninterrupted, favorable service unto the lotus feet of Lord Krishna, who carries the wheel of the chariot in his hand, can know the creator of the universe in his full glory, power, and transcendence. Quite clear. Yeah.
Can we say that if we have proper Sambandha Gyan, received from authority, from Guru, from Shastra, from Sadhu, that means we are following the path of Vidvat Pratiti?
Yes. It's so that there's going to be some. In other words, we can apply this concept moment to moment. It's not like, okay, I'm on this path. It's moment to moment. If your actions are actually based on something that is given in Shastra at that moment, that's Vidvat Pratiti. If in the very next moment you're relying on some experience you had, that's Avidvat Pratiti, right? So moment to moment this can change. It's just whatever our motivation is. Is it actually influenced by authorized knowledge, or is it influenced by materialistic experience, right? And that's what we tend to do. We tend to do this. The more we understand Shastra, especially the way that through its own language, the language that it's actually presented, and not just referring to it whenever we want to prove somebody wrong, and only looking up the things in the context of what makes our argument look more valid. Then we start making advancement. It depends on what our mood is when we're approaching Shastra. If we think, well, I know pretty much, but I just want to get some things that will make what I know a little more acceptable by others, then that's not such a great position to approach Shastra. The general principle is that we shouldn't adjust the Shastra to suit our lives. We should adjust our lives to suit Shastra, because Shastra is giving us the exact way that we should do everything. That's like a very precise recipe. And anytime we go off that recipe thinking, oh, actually, I think I know a better way, Krishna. I know that you've given us this authorized process, this spotless Purana. I know Srila Vyasadeva, put so much work into compiling all of these other Shastras to catch every single different type of mankind to bring them to Krishna consciousness. But this one is the absolute, cream of the crop, no room for interpretation. But still, Krishna, I'm pretty sure that my way, is actually a little bit better, right? Is that Krishna conscious or is that material consciousness? It's material consciousness. So it's going to cause unnecessary disturbance in society. So not only is it not the authorized path, but we're directly or indirectly blaspheming that proper path, because we're saying, no, my way is better. We may not directly be saying that, but our actions are saying that. We're putting more value in our own experience than in Shastra. So that's why it's important to understand our value system. We all have a value system, right? And the tricky part about it is we tend to, if you ask people to write down what they value, they will write a very nice list of the things that in theory they would like to value, right? The things that they know are good for them. But then if you have them write a list of how they spend their day, what percentage of the day do you spend doing this, right? You'll see there are two very different lists, right, unfortunately. And what that actually means is you don't value the things that you think you value. You value them in theory. You understand that they're important. But since you're spending your time on the other things, that's actually what you value. Because otherwise you wouldn't be spending so much time on them. If we actually valued these things, then we would be spending our time doing them. So it's a good exercise to make a list of what I do throughout the day, how much time I spend doing these different things, and then what I know to be actually valuable things that can actually help me in the path of Krishna consciousness. Compare those lists and figure out a way to get closer to the list that we actually want to follow. Start arranging, and Srila Prabhupada did this for us. He gave us a very strict schedule to follow, right? And when we follow that schedule, devotional progress becomes easier. Because throughout the day, we're being reminded that Krishna is the center and I'm the servant. Even just waking up and putting on our tilak, we're asking Krishna to protect us from all the directions. We are marking our bodies as his temple, and we are identifying ourselves as servants of Krishna. Now that doesn't mean because we paint this symbol on our forehead and other areas of our body that we have the consciousness of being servants of Krishna, but it helps us to get into that mindset. Right? So, as I said, Srila Prabhupada has already given us the formula to get from what we actually value to what we should or want to value. Well, we just have to actively pursue that. Because if we don't, we will find that we'll just continue doing these things that we actually value, these materialistic things that aren't really good for us. We can read in the Bhagavatam of what the result of doing those things are, what the result of reading other literatures would be, etc. It's all there, it's all explained. And when we read those descriptions, it's a no-brainer. Yeah, of course, I'm gonna stick to the Vedic literatures. I don't want to read this literature that's jugupsitam, that it's, a waste of time. But then, do we spend our time reading these literatures, or are we also interested in maybe sometimes what's happening in the news? That's also literature, but it doesn't actually pertain to the eternal self, our sat nature. And when we're conversing with others, is it all about scripture? Or is some of it about other things, weather, politics, entertainment, health, these things? Of course, some of these things can also run in parallel to the, talking about Shastra, the spiritual growth. But we have to actually understand what these things are. So a few days ago we talked about sadhu sangha and what it actually meant, the definition of it, and how we have to actually understand what it means so that we can actually engage in it. Otherwise we're engaging in something else. We think it's sadhu sangha and we're wondering why we're not making any advancement. So it's a very similar thing with other aspects of Krishna consciousness. We have to actually know if we're doing it properly, because it's a science. It's a very precise science. And if we don't follow it carefully, we're going to get a different result. It may be still a positive result, but it won't be the ultimate result that we want. Good? Good. Those interested in spiritual development should immediately obtain vidvat pratiti. What is the point in understanding through avidvat pratiti, falling into argument and confusion and losing the goal of life, right? So there's no point in it. So if we're actually interested in spiritual life, then none of the other things should concern us. Like, for example, there are some people, some aspiring devotees, who anytime any famous person says anything remotely in line with Krishna consciousness or maybe even mentions the Bhagavad Gita, or maybe they are wearing a t-shirt with Krishna on it, or maybe they attended some sort of kirtan at one point in their life, and then all of a sudden they're just all about this celebrity. Like, oh, you see, this person, you know, they went to a kirtan, so let's hear what they have to say on other matters, right? And so it's good that they went to kirtan, or that they're wearing a t-shirt or whatever, but their spark should be fanned. It shouldn't be that our attention is now completely engrossed in, oh, what are they going to do next? You know, even if it's what they're doing next is nothing to do with Krishna consciousness. I've seen many times, so on the subject of sadhu sangha and how we misdefine it sometimes, I'm not going to say where they were, there were a group of aspiring devotees who were really excited because there was an actor, I won't say his name, he's a comedian, he has a tattoo of Krishna, and he started associating with Radhanath Maharaj. And so the devotees got really excited about him, they started going to his movies. But his movies are quite vile. His brand of comedy is quite sexually suggestive and derogatory in some ways, and it's entertaining for some people, but it's not really, it's not Krishna. So some people were saying, oh, let's go see the new movie with this person in it who's associating with Radhanath Maharaj, and you know, but there's nothing Krishna conscious there. Maybe they'll see that he has a marking of Krishna on him, and they got reminded of Krishna, but is that sadhu sangha? Could we not have just sat down and talked about Krishna instead of going to waste time seeing this movie? And a lot of times, and I understand, people think, okay, you know, it's not that when I want to hang out with my friends, we want to sit down and have a Bhagavatam class, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, go through it. Sometimes we have this idea, because we are conditioned by the material schooling that we went through, that teaching is boring. We fall asleep during Bhagavatam class often, because it's, you know, just the right time, and it's the tone of it, and you know, you're sitting there, and we really want to have breakfast, and you know, we've been up for many hours, and so it happens, right? And so sometimes when a devotee, an aspiring devotee, will say, hey, do you want to discuss Bhagavatam? They're like, oh, come on, let's do something, you know, come on, don't be fanatical, let's, you know. But what we can do, even in those situations where people think, no, that's way too fanatical, it's not that you need to open up the Bhagavatam and have like a class, similar to how we're doing now. But we can talk like we're real people, find out what struggles we're having, and we can relate it back to Bhagavatam. We don't even have to necessarily refer to Bhagavatam. If they're really averse to hearing the word Srimad Bhagavatam, which is unfortunate, but if they are, we can still relate it back to the principles of the Bhagavatam, right? We don't even have to say, oh, well, we learned from the pastime of Ashvatthama that forgiveness is actually a very important thing, and we have to know when to forgive and when it's not appropriate, right? We don't have to say it in those terms. We say, I have a friend of mine who went through this experience, because we do have a friend that went through that experience. They happen to be personalities in the Srimad Bhagavatam. All Vaishnavas are friends. And we can explain their personal experience and what they had and the decisions they had to make and the different options that they had to weigh in their heads to make that decision. And then they just feel like it's real talk, and they don't feel like you're being too fanatical, right? We can do this to that kind of people. Now, there are also people that are just amped about, no, can you tell me something in Shastra that... I have a god sister, actually, recently is going through difficulties coming to grips with a situation that happened. And so she just directly asked me, is there anything in Shastra that actually shows us how to deal with it? Great. So I don't even have to disguise it. I could just say, yeah, here are, you know, 3 different things in Bhagavatam that give different angles of vision from a similar type of situation, and when you read through those, you'll see the reason they come from different angles is because the situations are different. So depending on what your situation is, it'll be more like one of these three, right? So sometimes it's just direct like that, and that's great. But sometimes we have to be a little clever. And not only do we have to be clever with other people, we have to be clever with ourselves, because our mind is very tricky, right? Our mind can do that too, like, oh, come on, you know. For a very long time, my mind, seeing the Srimad Bhagavatam on the shelf, was saying, you're never going to be able to read through that. It's huge. Are you kidding me? Don't even bother trying. Just listen to the senior devotees, and whatever they say, try to, do. And it sounds like good advice, right? That sounds like it could be good advice. Well, since then, I've read through the Srimad Bhagavatam 4 times. And every time I read it, I get more out of it. And had I not done that, I would be a very different person than I am now. I'd be saying words that I shouldn't be saying way more frequently than I just did earlier. And I wouldn't have access to a whole lot of actual knowledge, right? I'd still be depending on my own version of what I think is knowledge. Also based on Shastra, but not actually understanding Shastra. I'd be referring to it, but I wouldn't understand it, right? And so we have to be like that with ourselves too. The mind's very tricky. So when the mind says, come on, man, look how huge that is. It takes up like 2 shelves. You can't read that. Come on. But think of how many things we memorize on a daily basis, whether it's the latest songs or, if we're into TVs or movies, there are certain either franchises or series that are our favorite that we won't miss an episode. If we know the new episode's coming out at a certain time, if that's what we're into, for example, we're not going to miss it, right? But we may miss Mangalarti or something like that. We may miss Vyasa Puja, Janmastami, Bhagavatam class.
No prasadam.
We're not going to miss prasadam. Somehow, most of us aren't going to miss prasadam. It's funny, isn't it? So we have to train the mind to know what's good for us. So it says here, what's the point in understanding through avidvat pratiti, following into argument and confusion and losing the goal of life? Because, and then the first one, oh no, was it next then? Where was it? Basically, somewhere here we just read that as soon as we have this desire for spiritual engagement, then we go to the topmost. We don't bother with this. Where was it? Was it just what we read? It was recent. Anyway. Oh yeah. Those interested in spirit, this is the last sentence we read. Those interested in spiritual development should immediately obtain vidvat pratiti. What is the point in understanding through avidvat pratiti, falling into argument and confusion and losing the goal of life? Right? So as soon as we understand, okay, this is what we need. So don't try any of the indirect methods, because we know they're going to be incomplete. They're going to help us a little bit, but they're going to be incomplete. So go right to the source. And in order to do that, we have to understand what that is. In order to do that, we have to understand how to understand the Vedas. And the way we do that is through 3 things. Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra, of course. They're going to present. Shastra's there. The Guru's there to instruct us how to follow it. And the Sadhus are there to show by their examples how we can follow it. But as we're reading through Shastra, there are 3 things we have to keep in mind to determine whether we're actually getting the message of the Shastra or if we're just getting something that's material. And it's 3 things. The first one starts with an S. Sambandha. Sambandha, Abhideya, and Prayojana. If our explanation of the Shastra isn't referring to who we are in relationship to the Supreme Lord, what the goal of life is, and how do we get from where we are to where we want to be, If those things aren't being discussed in our discussion of Shastra, we're not actually discussing Shastra, we're discussing something else. That's why the Mayavadis, although they're referring to bona fide authorized Shastra, they're not actually discussing Shastra. The example I gave is Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya when he was preaching Vedanta to Lord Chaitanya for a week straight. And Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya said, "Are you getting anything that I'm saying? You're not, you haven't asked any questions, you haven't even shown any sort of interest or anything. Are you understanding what I'm saying? Do you not understand Vedanta?" "Oh no, I understand Vedanta, I just don't understand what you're talking about, because you're certainly not talking Vedanta." He was quoting Vedanta, but he didn't understand the actual, the principle of Vedanta, and that's understanding who we are in relationship to Krishna, establishing what our ultimate goal is, and figuring out a way to following the way that is given in Shastra to get from where we are to where we want to be. And that's that. So if we're trying to explain Shastra in any other way, it's not actually Shastra. Just like even if we're in the proximity of fellow aspiring Vaishnavas, if we're not actually identifying with that Sat principle coming down and making spiritual advancement, it's not sadhu sangha. It's hanging out with like-minded people, and unfortunately it's wasting time. Now there could be a worse waste of time, so kudos for that, but we just have to know what it is so that we're sure that we're actually doing it. Okay, it's 5:30. Good for tonight? Om Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur ki jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai.